All right, so we got a lot done to the truck this weekend. Wanted to get an update out, kind of what I'm working on, what's going on. Real quick on the rear axle, you can see we still got the rear axle tore down. It's at BKG right now. Those guys are, they're reworking the pinion for me, and they've got some work to do on the pinion housing. That pinion housing was a one-way housing. Really, it should have had 2 holes drilled in it. We built the pinion housing for the front, but that pinion housing was the one in the back. And you know, if you go back, and I put it back the same way it was built, but Larry actually ran grease in these axles and I'm running oil. And so the pinion bearing didn't get any grease because the whole hole wasn't drilled in the pinion housing. So that's why it ran before, didn't run when we put it back together. So we're machining a new pinion housing and they're drilling the hole for the oil to feed it. The pinion basically slings the oil over the top. There's a little scoop in the top of that carrier. That scoop holds the oil and runs that oil down into the pinion bearing. I know the front pinion is getting oil because it's leaking a little bit. I need to put a new wear sleeve on it. But it's a good identifier that that one's correct. So hopefully we'll get this back one, because you know, when you think about it, these are 2 front axles. They both steer. So when you flip that front axle, there's some machine work to flip that carrier and to make it oil the pinion. So anyway, that's where we're at. We're gonna get it back together. It's gonna be strong as ever. I'm gonna clean that ring and pinion up a little bit. We got a couple chips on the tooth in the inside. Everybody I talk to, it's not a problem. You'll never have an issue with it. Let's run it. So anyway, I'm gonna go with that. If not, I'm gonna have to get a custom ring and pinion built. I've looked at some 15 1/4s. We found some matches that were close, that were 16 bolt, but the pinions were too short. In the future, I can do that, but it's gonna go, the gear ratio on this one's a 2.9. Of course, you've got planetaries on the outside that are, I think, 3-to-1. And so I would have to go to a 308 ratio. The problem is that pinion's just a little bit bigger for that housing. So I'm gonna have to machine the whole inside of that housing out to get a 308 pinion in there. And that's to make the ring gear work. So if I ever had to make them in the future, there's a guy in Houston that'll custom make them. They're just a little pricey. So we're gonna run these. If I have an issue, then I'm gonna have to get some custom built down the road. But we shouldn't have any after this gets repaired. The things that I worked on this weekend, because of course this is down, so there's other stuff. It's always tying up hoses, tying up wiring, putting sleeves over wiring, you know, anything that's gonna vibrate, shake, rub, short, stuff like that. I'm going through this thing with a fine tooth comb along the frame, tying all the cables up. Just wanna make sure everything is nice and neat and clean and that we don't have any problems down the road. There's always a lot of that work to be done. We talk about the systems on this truck, and everybody's asked about, well, does the cab still tilt? And yes, the answer is that the cab does tilt. Now, we have air conditioning, we have radio, sound system, we have a sealed cab now, we have a lot of things moving. And so when I'm designing these things, I'm thinking about, you know, like the ACs, it stays with the frame and the bottom. It does not move up with the cab, right? But all the electronics, you know, basically have to be wired in the cab. All the power wiring and all the wiring to feed all that has to run to the back of the subframe and then loop back and come back to the front of the engine. And that's so when it tilts, I won't have any wires or anything in between, because this actually raises almost 6 feet from this point to the bottom of that frame. If you look along this subframe, if you ask me what you have to do, what the process is, it's probably about a 40-minute process to tilt the cab now. What's changed is, like I said, sealed cab, all kinds of devices. We've got a couple more, you know, things that are in the truck now. So basically what you have to do to tilt the cab, if I go under here and show you, right here, this is where the subframe bolts to the frame. I welded these nuts on the inside of the frame, so it makes it really easy. You can unbolt these real quick. These are the 2 main bolts. That's just a pin on the back. These are your hydraulic rams, just a power switch. So you come along here, knock those bolts out. We move to the front. I did put a factory bumper up here, and I wanted to brace this core support well because I don't want any of this moving. And so I put 2 nice pieces of plate here, and these are actually old frame horns off a 78 Ford truck that I bolted the bumper to. So to lift the cab, you've got to pull this back bolt, loosen this bolt, and there's a core support bolt right here that's actually a factory core support bolt that goes to these horns. You loosen both of those, this will tilt forward. When you lay this front bumper forward, there's a bevel, which we all know right here in the front on the grill. So it has to go forward for the cab to come up. Once you lay that forward, you've taken those bolts out. There's full tape and there's insulation in between the cab when it comes down. So you've got to place all that in there. And then if you ever come back down, we're gonna have to retape it. But all you have to do is take a razor, cut a line along the top and the sides, hit the hydraulics and lift it. Should be about a 45-minute process. If I need to work on the engine, it's a Detroit. We really shouldn't have much issues, but if we do, it's very simple. We lift that, I pull the driver and passenger seat, and then once I pull the driver and passenger seat, then that engine cowl will come straight out over the top in the front. So I can pull it up, and then we have full access to the engine to work on it. So just a couple more processes, but the trade-off is having AC, radio, all those good things. So this weekend, like I said, because it tilts, had to run a bunch of stuff to the back, to the front. I'm tying wires up, cleaning everything up. Did a lot of wiring on the lights. I got most of the tail lights. I think I've got one pigtail to replace on the back. The headlights, the grille. The other thing I ran into was I did buy the factory headlight buckets and was putting them in there. I really like the classic look of this truck, having the blacked out headlights. So we're gonna leave it like that. I did hook up the fog lights, got the clearance lights, all that stuff. We'll turn that stuff on for you in a minute and let you look at it. Just for lights at night, of course, the KC lights on top are very bright. There's plenty of light out in front of you, but your immediate light in the front, I put a small light bar here on the front, which is nice. We can turn that on. Then coming around the back. Around back here we can show them. Same thing back here. We've got the side markers hooked up. Like I said, I think that one side marker doesn't work on that side. I've got a new plug for it. Those plugs just get rusted out, so you've got to splice in new ones. Got the license plate lights on, tail lights, side markers. Same thing here on the back for backup lights. At nighttime, if we're moving this thing around, we really want to be able to see it. It's important, you know, just make sure nothing's in the way. I have LED lights that are actually going up under the steps. These are just what they call like the little buck LEDs. And the main reason I want these on there is not for looks, but if I am running at nighttime, I want it to be very visible that there's nobody around the truck or under the truck for safety. And those LED lights really make it, and you can change them from white to red to green to blue. They're not real bright, but it is enough that you'll be able to see under the truck at nighttime. And that's my goal. And I'm gonna mount those to the bottom of these steps. You won't see them. And that's all part of the cab lift system when it lifts up. The only other thing you have to do when you lift this cab in the inside is you have to pull the instrument cluster and the gauge cluster out. It comes out, there's two plugs. There's just no way for me to separate the ignition and all the instruments that I needed and have to run it all the way to the back. So I'm gonna make a little checklist for when you raise the cab. Like I said, you just go through the checklist and knock everything out. So let's turn these lights on. Let's let you take a look at it. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please tap that subscribe button, hit that like button. Appreciate you watching. I'm gonna run around, show you these lights. I'm gonna turn everything off. Here we go. All right guys, so if we look here, I've got to rename one of these, but we've got dome light, park lights, driving lights, roof lights, we've got bed lights, and then the backup lights, which you'll notice, turn them on, they light up. All right, guys, so we need to adjust the spots on the roof lights. And I need to adjust that the LED bar on the front, but you can see LED bar on the front. That's the KCs on the top. And then if we turn around,